Hi, I'm Lina. Welcome to Lina's Storybook, where we share the most unforgettable audio novels. Let's get started.
After being reborn, I calmly slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table to the husband who had betrayed me. He didn't even glance at them, scoffing that he would never surrender custody of our son. "I don't want custody," I replied flatly. "In my past life, I sacrificed my youth, my career, and my dignity for a son who ultimately thanked his father's mistress at his own wedding. This time, they can have each other. I'd rather die than do my homework. You can't force me." 8-year-old Ethan thrashed wildly on the expensive Persian rug of our suburban estate, kicking his legs and screaming at the top of his lungs. He threw his pencil across the room, putting on a spectacular performance, fully convinced that no matter what he did, I was utterly powerless against him, and in the past he would have been right. This exhausting battle of wills was a daily occurrence in our household. I was the strict mother who demanded he finish his math worksheets before he could touch his toys. I was the warden who restricted his television and iPad time to a mere 30 minutes a day. I was the health-conscious villain who only allowed him to eat fast food, his beloved fried chicken and burgers, once a week. I set these boundaries with the desperate hope that I was instilling good habits, molding him into a responsible, capable young man, but all my agonizing effort and carefully constructed rules were reduced to an absolute joke. The day Chloe entered our lives, whenever Ethan returned from spending time with his father and Chloe, he would glare at me with venom in his eyes, leveling his childish accusations. "Aunt Chloe never makes me do stupid homework, she actually plays with me," he would shout. "And she never stops me from eating chicken wings. She says growing boys need to eat a lot to get tall. I don't like you at all. I wish Aunt Chloe was my mom." In my previous life, those words had felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Yet, despite the profound heartbreak, I always chose to forgive him. I rationalized it, telling myself he was just a child, too young and naive to understand the ways of the world. I believed that one day, when he was older, he would look back and understand the depth of my maternal devotion. So, I kept pushing him. I forced him to study hard, dragged him to soccer practices for his health, and meticulously managed his diet. Eventually, that ungrateful boy grew up. He graduated from an Ivy League university, founded his own successful tech startup, and married a woman from a prominent, wealthy family. I still remember the crushing weight of his wedding day. When the MC handed Ethan the microphone to thank his parents, he stood before hundreds of elite guests, looked directly at me, and delivered the ultimate betrayal. "I hope my mother can finally step aside and give her blessing to my father and Aunt Chloe," Ethan declared into the microphone, his voice echoing through the grand ballroom. "Aunt Chloe has been by my father's side for so many years, and it hasn't been easy for her." Below the stage, Chloe wept delicately into a tissue, looking like the tragic heroine of a romance novel. It was as if every perceived hardship she had endured, as the other woman was finally validated and rewarded in that single moment. And I stood frozen on the stage, entirely superfluous, feeling like the punchline of a cruel decades-long joke. "Mom, you spent my entire childhood forcing me to do things I hated," Ethan continued, twisting the knife deeper. "If Aunt Chloe hadn't been there in the shadows, silently giving me warmth and encouragement, I would have been ruined long ago. You and Dad haven't loved each other for years. Why do you insist on hoarding the title of his wife, making everyone miserable?" I don't remember how I stumbled out of that luxurious hotel. I was a hollow shell, wandering aimlessly onto the busy city streets. I only know that in my devastated days, I stepped blindly into an intersection, ran a red light, and was violently struck by a speeding car. Then, the darkness receded, and I miraculously woke up. I had been given a second chance at life, blinking away the phantom glare of the headlights. I looked down at the misbehaving child currently rolling on the floor. The suffocating love I used to feel for him was entirely gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. I nodded slowly. "All right, no homework." Ethan, still sprawled on the carpet, froze in shock. He peered up at me suspiciously. "Are you serious?" "Of course," I replied, my voice perfectly placid. "Then, can I keep watching TV right now?" he asked, testing the waters. You can watch TV, and you can play on your iPad too. Emboldened by my unprecedented leniency, Ethan pushed his luck. Can I eat potato chips while I play? Whatever you want, I said, turning away. Why are you suddenly being so nice to me? Ethan asked, his eyes wide with bewilderment. I just smiled, keeping my thoughts to myself. An ungrateful cold-blooded wolf cub didn't deserve a single ounce of my genuine care. Are you scared that I'll only love Aunt Chloe and won't love you anymore? Ethan asked, a smug, triumphant smirk spreading across his little face. I looked down at him, my expression unreadable. From now on, whatever you want, I will let you have it, I articulated clearly, emphasizing every word, including your favorite Aunt Chloe. Once I began granting Ethan's every absurd request, his behavior rapidly spiraled out of control. Without boundaries, he became a tyrant in his own home. The very first thing he did upon walking through the door from school was grab his iPad. He played it while eating dinner, barely chewing his food as he stared mindlessly at the screen. When it was time for bed, he refused to let go of the device, falling asleep with it clutched to his chest. If he stayed up too late gaming and couldn't wake up the next morning, I didn't bother shaking him awake. I simply let him sleep until he naturally opened his eyes. If he woke up and decided he didn't want to go to school, I didn't utter a word of protest. As for the junk food he used to beg for, the chips, the sodas, the candy, I instructed the kitchen to keep an unlimited supply. Even Maria, our seasoned housekeeper, couldn't bear to watch the boy's deterioration. She pulled me aside one afternoon, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. Ma'am, if you keep spoiling the young master like this, you're going to ruin him, she warned gently. I let out a short, cynical laugh. How could that be? I replied, my tone dripping with irony. According to him, forcing him to do things he doesn't like is what ruins him. It didn't take long for the consequences of this absolute freedom to manifest outside the house. Ethan's elite private school quickly lost patience with his drastic shift in behavior. His homeroom teacher called me in a panic, reporting that Ethan had openly defied her during a lesson. When she reprimanded him, he had the audacity to shout back, my own parents don't even care what I do. Who are you to tell me what to do? I'm incredibly sorry, but he is completely out of my hands now. If there are any further issues, please contact my husband, I said breezily, rattling off Zachary's private cell phone number to the stunned teacher. I hung up the phone without a second thought, closed my eyes, and went back to enjoying my facial massage at the luxury spa. By the time I finished my treatments and returned to our sprawling estate, I found Zachary standing in the grand foyer. It was a rare sight. He practically lived at his corporate office these days. His face was a storm of fury, his voice laced with bitter sarcasm as he approached me. Serena, your little schemes are getting more sophisticated by the day. To manipulate me into coming home. You're actually using our son, he snarled. I suppose I did want Zachary to come back to the house. After all, calling him directly had proven to be completely useless. Looking at the handsome, furious man before me, I genuinely couldn't remember when our relationship had devolved into this toxic adversarial warfare. We hadn't been arranged. We were college sweethearts who fell madly in love at Columbia University. We married willingly, shared years of grueling hardship, and built our tech empire from the ground up, side by side. Once the company stabilized and began generating massive wealth, I stepped back from my executive role, choosing to become a traditional homemaker to raise our son. I poured every ounce of my energy into Ethan. By the time I finally noticed the subtle shifts in Zachary's behavior, the late nights, the guarded phone screens, he had already embarked on an emotional affair. The object of his affection was Chloe, a 20-year-old intern at our company. She was everything I no longer was, youthful, vibrant, and incredibly delicate. I had accidentally stumbled upon their private text messages on his iPad. Zachary had written, "You remind me of my wife when she was young. She used to be just as pure and adorable as you are. And what about now?" Chloe had replied, attaching an innocent, curious emoji. "Now she has gained weight." Zachary's response read, "Honestly, sometimes when we're intimate, I find it a bit repulsive. Reading those words had shattered me. I never imagined that in the mind of the man I had sacrificed my youth for, I had been reduced to something so grotesque. I exploded. The ensuing fight was catastrophic. Feeling my dignity had been completely pulverized, I demanded a divorce. Zachary panicked and refused. He desperately explained that he was just humoring a young girl, begging me not to blow things out of proportion. Our parents on both sides intervened, pleading with me to look at our 2-year-old son. They urged me to swallow my pride and forgive Zachary this one time, for the sake of keeping the family intact. Zachary swore on his life that he would cut all ties with Chloe. He fired her the very next day to prove his absolute loyalty to me. Furthermore, at that point, Zachary hadn't actually crossed the physical line with her, so suppressing my profound humiliation, I chose to forgive him. I even started to gaslight myself, wondering if I really had neglected him by focusing too entirely on our child and letting myself go. But just as I was frantically trying to change myself, dieting, working out, buying new clothes, Zachary crossed the physical line the night I received the explicit photos of Chloe and Zachary in bed together. I was sitting alone in a sterile hospital room, keeping watch over a violently ill Ethan. Ethan had spiked a sudden, terrifyingly high fever that led to febrile seizures. Panicked and crying, I rushed him to the emergency room in the middle of the night. Once the doctors stabilized him, I called Zachary, needing my husband. He answered with a heavy sigh of annoyance. Enough, Serena. I'm out at a crucial business dinner. Stop fabricating ridiculous excuses just to force me to come home, he had barked before abruptly hanging up. So, I sat by my 3-year-old's hospital bed, completely alone in the quiet dark, until my phone chimed. It was a message from Chloe. She had sent a series of incredibly graphic, intimate photos of her and Zachary. Accompanying the images was a venomous text. Zachary told me that even after you lost the weight, you're still ugly. You'll never be as soft and sweet as I am. In that sterile, fluorescent lit room, the devastating truth finally settled over me. When a man cheats, he cheats. There is no meaningful distinction between a spiritual betrayal and a physical one. I presented him with divorce papers for the second time. This time, Zachary didn't beg or refuse. He agreed, but on one uncompromising condition: Ethan would stay with him. At that point in my life, Ethan was my entire universe. I had poured every drop of my love and identity into being his mother. He was only 3 years old, a toddler who clung to me constantly. If I wasn't lying next to him, he would cry until the sun came up, refusing to sleep. The mere thought of abandoning him felt like ripping my own heart out. I considered fighting him in court for custody, but reality was a bitter pill. I had been out of the workforce for years, utterly financially dependent. I had no chance against Zachary's corporate wealth and high-powered legal team. Because of that agonizing stalemate, our broken marriage dragged on for years like a rotting corpse. He absolutely refused to relinquish custody. I adamantly refused to leave without my son. As Ethan grew older, the chaos became my normal. I seemingly grew accustomed to the wretched hollow shell of our marriage. Habit is a terrifyingly powerful force. Even though I harbored a deep, burning hatred for Zachary's infidelity, I ended up spending the vast majority of my life chained to him. Thank God the universe had granted me a rebirth. Snapping back to the present, I calmly walked over to the mahogany console table, opened the drawer, and pulled out the freshly printed divorce agreement. I handed it to Zachary without a trace of emotion. The moment his eyes landed on the bold divorce agreement, at the top of the page, a mocking sneer contorted his handsome features. Serena, I actually thought you had finally figured things out. You've been quiet for so long, and now you're starting this drama again. What exactly do you want from me? Is the monthly allowance I give you not enough? It is not enough, I answered plainly. How much do you want? Zachary asked, waving his hand with the arrogant magnanimity of a billionaire. Half of the company's assets, I stated. Zachary's mocking smile vanished, replaced by explosive rage. Are you out of your mind, Serena? Have you completely lost it? We founded that company together. It is legally classified as marital property acquired after our wedding. I've already consulted with my attorneys. Half of it rightfully belongs to me, I explained, my voice steady against his rising volume. And so what? Zachary yelled, running a frustrated hand through his hair. Unless we actually divorce, it remains marital property, which is exactly why I am divorcing you right now, I said, gesturing gracefully toward the papers in his hand. Zachary let out a harsh, cold laugh. Dismissing me entirely, he tossed the document onto the sofa. I will never give you custody of our son. I don't want him, I replied. Zachary paused, his eyes narrowing as he studied my face, searching for the bluff. You've thought this through. I've thought it through. Frowning heavily, Zachary reached down and picked the divorce agreement back up. Finally reading it seriously, the terms were completely fair. Aside from the 50% of the assets that were legally mine, I hadn't demanded a single cent more, and explicitly outlined on the second page, I voluntarily surrendered all custody rights of Ethan to him. Zachary's brow furrowed so deeply, it created a sharp crease. He lowered the papers and glared at me. Serena, don't you dare regret this later. Voluntarily giving up custody means that without my explicit permission, you will not be allowed to see him. I am fully aware, once we sign this and divorce, there is absolutely zero chance of us ever remarrying. Not even for our son's sake, Zachary threatened, his voice dripping with finality. Just sign it, I said, entirely out of patience for his posturing. If it hadn't been so difficult to pin him down in person, the very first thing I would have done upon my rebirth was drag him to a lawyer's office to end this farce. Seeing the absolute, unyielding resolve in my eyes, Zachary scoffed. He pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his tailored jacket and scrawled his flamboyant signature across the dotted line. You brought this upon yourself, Serena, he sneered, tossing the signed papers back onto the table. If you hadn't pushed me like this, considering our son and the years we spent together, I would have let you keep the title of Mrs. Davis for the rest of your life. You just didn't know how to appreciate what you had. Whoever cares about that title can have it, I replied with complete indifference. In my past life, maintaining this suffocating marriage was never about holding on to the prestige of being Mrs. Davis. It had purely been about the unbreakable chains of blood and motherhood. Pack up your garbage and get the hell out of my house, Zachary barked, throwing the signed divorce agreement in my direction. I had already anticipated this. My designer luggage was fully packed and waiting upstairs. I had just been biding my time until Zachary finally came home to finalize the paperwork. Without another word to him, I turned on my heel and ascended the grand, sweeping staircase. Ethan, who had apparently returned home with Zachary, after being suspended from school for 2 days to reflect on his behavior, had been hiding in the shadows of the upstairs landing, eavesdropping on our entire conversation. When he saw me walking toward the master bedroom, he scrambled out of his hiding spot and tailed me. Are you really going to divorce Dad? Ethan asked, watching as I zipped up my Louis Vuitton trunks. You must be thrilled, right? I said lightly, effortlessly dragging my suitcase toward the door. From now on, no one will ever nag you or discipline you again. You can do absolutely whatever you want. Ethan frowned, crossing his arms. Aren't you afraid that after you leave Dad, nobody else will ever want you? I stopped walking and looked at him, genuinely amused. Who told you that nobody would want me? Grandma and Dad both said so, Ethan stated with complete innocent honesty. They said you're not good enough for Dad anymore, that nobody would want a divorced woman like you, and that you'd never actually have the guts to leave him. I actually laughed out loud. I had seen through Zachary's narcissistic, repulsive character years ago, but I hadn't realized his mother was just as vile. She always played the role of the benevolent peacemaker, constantly telling me how flawed her son was, and praising me for working so hard to raise her grandson. As it turned out, behind my back, she viewed me as nothing more than a pathetic, free nanny for the Davis bloodline. Of course, none of that mattered anymore. From this moment on, they were all entirely irrelevant to my life. Listen, as long as you promise to stop bossing me around, and promise to stay out of Dad and Aunt Chloe's business, I'll go beg Dad not to divorce you, Ethan offered, attempting to negotiate with me like a tiny, arrogant businessman. There is no need for that, I said. I reached out and gently patted his head, offering him a final soft smile. take good care of yourself from now on, because from this day forward, his growth, his struggles, and his life would have absolutely nothing to do with me. I gripped the handles of my 2 large suitcases and walked out of the mansion. I didn't look back. Not even once. I moved straight into a beautifully renovated, pre-furnished apartment I had scouted weeks in advance. It was located on the Upper West Side, just a few blocks from Columbia University. My plan was to prepare for the rigorous graduate entrance exams and completely reinvent my professional life. When Zachary and I were undergrads, I had willingly forfeited my guaranteed spot in a prestigious master's program, so I could help him launch his tech startup. After the company succeeded and we had Ethan, I shifted my focus entirely to domestic life. It had always been a quiet, lingering regret in my heart that I never earned my master's or PhD, reborn with perfect hindsight. I profoundly understood one universal truth: a person must live for themselves. No one else will ever truly empathize with your sacrifices. On the second day after moving out of the Davis estate, I was taking a coffee break when I saw a new post pop up on Chloe's Instagram feed. She was the one who had proactively added me on social media years ago. It happened at the company's annual gala. I had attended as Zachary's wife, and Chloe had approached me, sweetly complimenting my diamond earrings. She asked for my contact info, so I could send her the designer link. Sometime later, Chloe miraculously acquired the exact same pair of earrings, only she hadn't bought them. They were a gift from Zachary. Her new Instagram post featured a sweeping panoramic photo of the impeccably manicured backyard of the Davis estate. The caption read, "Poverty really limited my imagination. Is a backyard this massive meant for playing professional soccer?" Her intention was glaringly obvious. She was broadcasting to the entire world that she had officially, legitimately taken residence by Zachary's side. She was declaring that she was no longer a shameful, hidden mistress. Smiling to myself, I tapped the screen and gave her post a like. Trash belongs with trash. May they endure each other forever. I had barely locked my phone screen after liking her post when a new iMessage notification popped up. It was a direct message from Chloe. "Serena, I hope you don't mind me posting that on Instagram," she wrote, adding a faux innocent angelic emoji. Zachary actually insisted I post it. He said I've been wronged and kept in the dark for far too long, and he wanted everyone to know. In the past, Chloe would frequently pull these exact manipulative stunts to provoke me. She would routinely text me intimate photos of her and Zachary, or send long sappy paragraphs, detailing exactly how much he loved her. Then, timing it perfectly before I could formulate a reply, she would unsend the messages and follow up with a sickly sweet, "Oops. I'm so sorry. Sent that to the wrong person." Back then, those pathetic games had genuinely worked. They drove me to the brink of insanity, causing me to lose my temper and scream at Zachary. The ultimate result was always exactly what Chloe wanted. Zachary and I grew further apart, our relationship deteriorating into toxic resentment. He practically stopped coming home entirely. Even for Ethan's birthdays, Zachary would take our son out to celebrate at Chloe's lavish apartment, instead of with me, and every single time Ethan returned from those visits, he would parrot the same agonizing lines. "Aunt Chloe is so good to me. She's so gentle and pretty. I really want her to be my mom." Looking back now from the quiet sanctuary of my new apartment, I genuinely couldn't fathom how I had endured that agonizing humiliation for an entire lifetime. The only silver lining was that the wounds had cut so unimaginably deep that I was left without a single shred of lingering attachment to either of them. I smiled and typed out a breezy reply. "Why would I mind? Didn't you see I even gave it a like? You're just putting on a brave face for Zachary, aren't you?" Chloe shot back almost instantly. She was entirely convinced that my sudden departure and the divorce were nothing more than a desperate, dramatic bluff to win my husband's attention back. I rolled my eyes. I didn't want to engage anymore. Wasting even a fraction of my renewed life on a woman like her was a tragedy. I was just about to block her number when my phone buzzed again. "You forgot to pack something," she wrote. Impossible. I had meticulously checked every drawer, closet, and cabinet in that sprawling house. There was absolutely no way I had left any of my personal belongings behind. A second later, an image loaded on my screen. It was a photograph of a box of Trojan condoms, without missing a beat. I replied generously, "You can keep them as a gift, they're expired." Chloe replied, attaching a crying laughing emoji to mock me. She quickly added, "Didn't manage to use them up from years ago." Ever since Zachary moved in with me, we go through several a day. We can barely buy them fast enough. Isn't that perfect then? I typed back, my expression entirely placid. "You've always loved collecting my unwanted garbage. Think of it as recycling. Who are you calling garbage?" Chloe texted back, her text practically vibrating with sudden explosive rage, while the typing bubble danced on the screen indicating her frantic, furious response. I calmly went into her contact settings and blocked her number. Out of sight, out of mind, with Chloe and Zachary's toxic presence scrubbed from my digital life, my mind felt incredibly clear, free from the constant, suffocating anxiety of my old marriage. I poured every ounce of my energy into preparing for the degree and my graduate school applications. I didn't hear a single word from either of them until exactly a month later, when Zachary suddenly called me from an unknown number. "Where the hell have you been hiding, Serena?" he snapped the second I answered. "If you didn't actually want to get divorced, why did you put on that ridiculous act?" "Well, it is too late now." I glanced at the calendar on my desk. I had been so buried in my textbooks that I had completely forgotten. Today was the finalization date. In the state of New York, after filing the initial paperwork, we had a mandatory cooling-off period before we had to appear before the judge to officially dissolve the marriage. Today was that day. "I'll be right there," I said smoothly. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and didn't waste a single second. I practically floored the gas pedal of my car, all the way to the downtown courthouse. When I finally arrived, Zachary was pacing near the entrance. He looked at me with a distinctly mocking, triumphant smirk. We had initially agreed to meet at the courthouse right when the doors opened at 10 a.m. It was now almost noon, and the clerks were preparing to go on their lunch break. "Serena," Zachary sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. "When you forced me to sign those papers a month ago, I warned you that regretting it later would be useless. I don't know what kind of childish delay tactic you're trying to pull today. But this divorce is happening." "Great, let's go," I agreed immediately, not breaking my stride as I walked toward the metal detectors. Zachary faltered for a second, clearly thrown off by my enthusiasm, before catching up. "I actually have to thank you. If you hadn't voluntarily stepped aside, I never would have realized how incredible Chloe is at raising a child, despite being so young. When you were taking care of Ethan, the house was a constant war zone of screaming and crying. But since Chloe moved in, he has been an absolute angel." "Well, congratulations on securing such a capable homemaker," I replied mildly, signing my name on the visitor log. "Still stubbornly putting on an act, I see." Zachary scoffed, clearly believing my indifference was a fragile mask. "Let's see how long you can keep this up." The moment the judge banged the gavel and handed me the final divorce decree with its raised golden seal, a massive physical weight lifted off my chest. I let out a long breath I felt I had been holding for years. I had genuinely been terrified that my 2-hour delay might have exhausted Zachary's limited patience, causing him to storm off and prolong my legal ties to him. I simply couldn't stomach the thought of wasting another minute of my life on that man. "Serena," Zachary shouted my name from the courthouse steps. I was walking away swiftly, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. "From this moment on, we have absolutely no relationship whatsoever," he yelled after me, his voice echoing in the busy plaza. "If you ever start regretting this." I unlocked my car, slipped into the driver's seat, and sped away, merging seamlessly into the New York City traffic. I couldn't bear to listen to another syllable out of his mouth. With my freedom officially restored, my motivation skyrocketed. Every single day, aside from intensely studying for my entrance exams and drafting research proposals, I dedicated an hour to Pilates and weightlifting. I swore to myself I would never allow my physical and mental health to deteriorate the way it had in my previous life. where I was plagued by stress-induced ailments. Over half a year passed in a blur of focused, relentless effort. Finally, all the grueling late nights paid off. I was officially accepted into Columbia University's highly competitive master's program. During those quiet months of rebuilding my life, Ethan had called me exactly once. He had stammered into the phone, his voice small and hesitant. "Mom, do you miss me?" I didn't pause. "No, Mom is very busy right now," I answered honestly. There was a long silence on the line. "Today is my 9th birthday," he finally murmured, sounding deeply disappointed. "Happy birthday," I replied, my tone polite but distant, like I was speaking to a neighbor's child. "Don't you want to come celebrate with me?" he pleaded. "Your father made it very clear that without his explicit permission, I am not allowed to see you alone," I reminded him coolly. "Well, can't you just beg Dad to let you?" Ethan asked, his voice rising with sudden desperate agitation. "No," I stated flatly. "Why do you always have to fight with Dad?" "Actually, Dad," Ethan started to whine, "I'm going to stop you right there. I have very important things to do," I interrupted smoothly, and without waiting for his reply, I hung up the phone. In my past life, doing such a thing would have been entirely unfathomable. Whenever I was on the phone with him, I would always linger, clinging to his voice, waiting until he hung up first before I finally lowered the receiver. But look at me now. It turns out that there is nothing in this world that cannot be severed. You just have to be pushed to a profound enough level of disappointment. Late one night during my first semester of grad school, my phone began vibrating loudly against my nightstand. I groggily picked it up. I hadn't blocked Zachary's number simply because I had been utterly certain his massive ego would never allow him to initiate contact with me. And honestly, for the past year and a half, he had been a model ex-husband, entirely absent, practically dead to the world. Still half asleep, I didn't bother checking the caller ID. "Hello," I mumbled. "Serena, I am absolutely not giving you another chance." Zachary's icy, arrogant voice echoed through the speaker. "Huh?" I muttered, genuinely confused. Was he possessed? "Chloe is pregnant with my child. We are getting married," he announced proudly, the smugness radiating through the phone. "Oh, congratulations," I replied mildly. Although being woken up at 2 a.m. was intensely irritating, I offered the polite, reflexive blessing of a stranger. "Heh." Zachary scoffed coldly, and then abruptly hung up. I rolled over and went back to sleep, dismissing the bizarre interaction entirely. I wouldn't have given it a second thought if a heavy cream-colored wedding invitation hadn't arrived in my mailbox a few weeks later. The calligraphy proudly displayed my full name on the envelope. I highly doubted it was a mailing error. Chloe wanted to rub her ultimate victory in my face. Naturally, just because I was invited didn't mean I had any obligation to attend. I tossed the expensive cardstock directly into the recycling bin. However, on the afternoon of the wedding, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mom, why aren't you here yet?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Here where?" I asked, genuinely confused for a moment, as I reviewed a stack of lab reports. "At Dad and Aunt Chloe's wedding venue," he cried. "I never said I was coming," I replied. "But Dad sent you an invitation. I got up super early to save a front row seat just for you." "Why aren't you coming?" Ethan's voice finally broke into a watery sob. My heart felt utterly still, a placid lake untouched by the wind. "I have my own things to take care of today. I can't make it. Thank you for saving the seat, but you can go ahead and give it to someone else now." I pulled the phone away from my ear, ready to tap the red button. "Are those stupid things really more important than me?" Ethan screamed into the phone, sounding completely devastated. I paused, considered his question for a brief moment, and answered with absolute honesty. "Yes, they are much more important than you. You simply don't matter to me anymore." Just minutes after I rejected my son's tearful demands, my phone rang again. This time, it was Zachary. "Serena, if you're feeling bitter and uncomfortable about me marrying Chloe, fine. But taking your petty anger out on our son, that is crossing a line." He roared into the receiver. "Excuse me?" I asked, genuinely baffled by his logic. "What the hell did you just say to Ethan?" He hasn't stopped crying since he hung up the phone with you, Zachary demanded. I didn't say anything mean. I certainly didn't curse at him, I explained calmly. Stop making excuses. You just can't stand the fact that I'm officially making Chloe my wife. So you're using Ethan as a punching bag to vent your jealousy, he accused, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. In that moment, my primary emotion was sheer, unadulterated speechlessness. Cat got your tongue, you admit it, don't you? Zachary sneered when I didn't immediately respond. Well, it is too late for regrets now. I'm moving on. I sincerely wish you and Chloe a lifetime of happiness together, I said dryly. I hung up the phone and finally added Zachary's number to my blocked contacts list. I assumed that now that he was officially married to his precious intern, our lives would permanently diverge like two parallel lines. I was wrong. Less than a month later, Zachary miraculously materialized at the main gates of the Columbia University campus. I was just walking out of the neuroscience research building with Julian, a senior doctoral candidate in my lab. We were deeply engrossed in a debate about our recent datasets. Our heads bent close together as we reviewed the graphs on his tablet. When I looked up, I was startled to see Zachary standing right by the wrought iron gates, tightly gripping a very sullen-looking Ethan by the shoulder. He was waiting for me. How did he even know I was enrolled in grad school here? The moment Zachary's eyes locked onto me, his gaze immediately snapped to Julian standing by my side. A flash of intense anger seemed to cross his handsome face. Though I quickly dismissed it as an illusion, Zachary stepped forward, his tone dripping with acidic sarcasm. Well, this certainly explains why you were so eager to abandon your own son. Turns out you've got a new toy boy to keep you busy. Tell me, Serena, does this guy even know you're a divorced woman with a 10-year-old kid? Before I could even open my mouth to shut him down, Julian stepped smoothly in front of me, shielding me slightly. I'm fully aware, Julian answered evenly, staring Zachary down with absolute calm. I also heard her ex-husband is a massive cheating scumbag. Would you happen to know him? I couldn't help it. A sharp laugh escaped my lips. Zachary's face flushed a dark, furious crimson. His jaw ticked wildly. I am here to speak with Serena on a private family matter, he ground out coldly, glaring at Julian, clearly expecting the other man to politely excuse himself. Julian ignored him entirely. He turned his back to Zachary and looked down at me softly. Do you need me to stick around? Are you going to have any trouble? No, I'm fine. I smiled up at him reassuringly. You can head back. I'll take the subway home myself in a bit. Call me if you need anything. I'll call campus security for you, Julian promised loud enough for Zachary to hear. Before finally walking away toward the library. He is 50 feet away and you're still staring at him. Is it really that hard to tear yourselves apart? Zachary sneered, adjusting his expensive Rolex. I pulled my gaze away from Julian's retreating back and leveled a cold stare at my ex-husband. What do you want? Is blocking my number supposed to be funny? Zachary demanded. Why would I keep contact information for someone entirely irrelevant to my life? I replied smoothly. Are you really just going to throw away your own son? Zachary challenged, thrusting Ethan forward slightly. I glanced down at Ethan. He was staring up at me with wide, pitiful eyes. I smiled softly. He was the one who threw me away. I am simply respecting his choice. I didn't throw you away. Ethan immediately blurted out, his voice cracking with panic. I want to be with you forever. I walked a step closer to the boy, noting that he had gained a significant amount of weight since the last time I saw him. His cheeks were entirely puffed out. Have you forgotten? I asked gently, keeping a smile on my face. You explicitly told me that you wanted Aunt Chloe to be your mother. Now she officially is your new mom. Shouldn't you be thrilled? Ethan's eyes instantly welled with red-rimmed tears. He bit his lower lip hard, looking thoroughly miserable. Zachary cleared his throat, finally dropping the hostile sarcasm to state his actual business. Chloe is pregnant. As you know, she has been diagnosed with severe pregnancy-induced hormonal imbalances, and is incredibly easily agitated. Her doctors said she strictly requires an absolute perfectly quiet environment to protect the baby. So for the time being, Ethan needs to live here with you. I'm incredibly busy. I replied instantly, my brow furrowing in genuine reluctance. The workload in my research lab is massive, and I have absolutely no free time to babysit him. On top of that, I'm already beginning my preparations to apply for my PhD program. You're prioritizing reading some useless textbooks over your own flesh and blood. Zachary exploded, instantly triggered by my refusal. You're a woman in your 30s. What the hell is the point of getting another degree at your age? How much money is a degree going to make you anyway? The millions I gave you in the divorce settlement are more than enough to fund your lifestyle for the rest of your natural life. Stop being so incredibly fake and pretentious, Serena. I genuinely didn't want to engage in a screaming match with Zachary on a public Ivy League campus. But some people simply do not know how to quit while they're ahead. Give them an inch, and they will trample right over you. I took a slow, deep breath, reining in my rising temper, and looked him dead in the eye. Zachary, in all the years we were together, did I ever do a single thing to betray you? Why the hell are you bringing up the past now? Zachary snapped, shifting his weight uncomfortably. I never betrayed you. I dedicated every fiber of my being to you, to our son, and to our family. When our marriage dissolved, it was solely because you chose to cheat. And when we divorced, you were the one who aggressively demanded full custody. Ethan explicitly stated he preferred Chloe over me. I gracefully stepped aside and granted every single one of you exactly what you wanted. Now, I am finally living my own life. Is that a crime? I never said it was a crime. Zachary muttered defensively. Then who gives you the right to show up here and belittle my pursuit of a master's and PhD? I challenged, my voice icy. It is an emergency situation right now. Can't you just make a tiny sacrifice for the sake of your son? Zachary argued, looking at me as if I was the most unreasonable creature on earth. Sacrifice? I repeated, letting out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Why am I always the one who has to sacrifice? When we graduated from undergrad, you told me you desperately needed my help to launch your startup. So I sacrificed my guaranteed spot in grad school for you. Years later, when the tech company became successful and Ethan was born, you told me to sacrifice my thriving career to return to the home. And finally, when we divorced, I sacrificed my custody rights, just as you desired. And now, I continued, my voice dripping with absolute contempt. Now that you have your shiny new family, you suddenly realize Ethan is an inconvenience to your pregnant new wife. So you want me to sacrifice my life yet again, just to ensure your domestic bliss. Do you have any idea how utterly shameless you are? Zachary, when did I ever say I didn't want my son? Zachary yelled, his face flushing violently as my words pierced through his fragile ego. He was losing control of his temper. I said this is strictly temporary while Chloe is pregnant. I'll even pay you double the monthly child support for your trouble. And what happens after she gives birth? I mocked softly. Will she suddenly be diagnosed with severe postpartum depression? And when that clears up, will it be chronic nervous exhaustion? There are thousands of obscure medical conditions in the world. I'm sure she'll find one or two perfectly tailored to keep Ethan out of the house forever. Chloe is not that kind of person. She loves Ethan. She treats him like her own flesh and blood, Zachary insisted vehemently, obviously catching my implication that his new wife was intentionally trying to exile her stepson. If she loves him like her own, then how could his mere presence possibly negatively affect her pregnancy? Your logic contradicts itself, I pointed out coldly. Zachary opened his mouth to argue, but found himself entirely speechless. Silence hung heavily in the crisp autumn air. Suddenly, Ethan tugged on my coat sleeve, looking up at me with utter devastation in his eyes. Mom, do you really not want me anymore? He was 10 years old now. He was old enough to comprehend the brutal subtext of the adult arguments happening around him. It is not that I don't want you, I told Ethan, ensuring my voice remained gentle and calm. It is simply because you have Aunt Chloe to be your new mother now. And that gives me great peace of mind. In the old days, I was always the one forced to play the villain, the strict disciplinarian forcing him to study and eat his vegetables. Now that I harbored absolutely zero expectations for his future, I resolved to never speak a harsh word to him again, but my profound gentleness only seemed to terrify Ethan more. "Mom, please don't smile at me like that," he whispered, his voice trembling. "When you smile like that, it feels like you really don't love me anymore." I reached out and softly patted the crown of his head. "How could I not love you? I just don't want to force you to do things you hate anymore. I'd hate to be the one who ruins you when you grow up." "Enough, Serena," Zachary hissed, violently grabbing Ethan's hand and pulling him away from me. His masculine pride had clearly taken a fatal hit. He wasn't used to me treating him with such dismissive, impenetrable armor. As Zachary dragged a crying Ethan away toward his parked Mercedes, he spun around one last time to hurl a final threat. "Since you refuse to care for your own son, I won't beg you, but mark my words, don't ever expect him to acknowledge you as his mother again." I shrugged casually, utterly unbothered. Regardless of how I treated him, he would grow up to acknowledge only his precious Aunt Chloe anyway. Why on earth would I subject myself to unnecessary misery? I threw myself entirely into living the life I had always desired. Even though my days were utterly exhausting, filled with complex research, data analysis, and endless reading, I felt a profound sense of happiness and accomplishment. I finally realized that prioritizing myself genuinely led to an incredibly fulfilling existence, or at least, it was fulfilling when I wasn't being occasionally interrupted by the ghosts of my past. One afternoon, after completing a grueling set of lab experiments, I picked up my phone, which had been set to silent. The screen displayed over a dozen missed calls from an unknown number. Feeling a prickle of unease, I dialed it back. Zachary answered almost immediately. "Serena, you need to get to Mount Sinai Hospital right now. Ethan had an accident. He is badly hurt, and he has been admitted," he said, his voice unusually strained. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the sterile white walls of the lab. Despite everything, Ethan was still my biological son. Even if the maternal love had burned to ash, a basic sense of human responsibility lingered. I grabbed my coat and hailed a cab to the hospital. As I approached the private VIP pediatric wing, I didn't even need to look at room numbers. I could hear the explosive screaming echoing down the pristine hallway. "Zachary, how much longer are you going to take to get rid of that brat?" Chloe shrieked, her voice shrill and hysterical. "If you don't send him away immediately, I'm going to end up dead because of him. Do you want the blood of me and your unborn son on your hands?" "2 lives, Zachary. I've told you 100 times Ethan isn't out to get you. Why do you keep targeting him?" Zachary roared back, sounding utterly exhausted. He fell down a flight of stairs and fractured his leg. "He is a child in a hospital bed. And you haven't shown a single ounce of concern for him, so you want to see me thrown down the stairs next. Is that it?" Chloe fired back, her volume escalating. "If I die, it'll give you the perfect excuse to get back together with Serena, right? Then your precious little family of 3 can finally be reunited." "That is enough, Chloe. Stop acting like a lunatic," Zachary snapped, his patience entirely shattered. "Ethan needs to rest and recover." "Oh, you want to see a lunatic? I'll show you what a real lunatic looks like," Chloe threatened aggressively. "I'm putting my foot down right now. Either you make your son pack his bags and get out of our house, or I'm taking the baby in my stomach and jumping off the hospital roof." "He is 10 years old. Where exactly is he supposed to go?" Zachary demanded, his voice trembling with sheer rage. "I don't care where he goes. I just never want to see his face again," Chloe declared fiercely. "Otherwise, prepare for a double funeral." With that final, dramatic ultimatum, Chloe violently yanked open the hospital room door and stormed out. She immediately collided with me, standing in the hallway. The moment Chloe saw me, she froze. I stared back at her, equally stunned. Was this heavily pregnant, haggard woman really the same delicate, vibrant 20-something girl from 2 years ago, with her swollen face, dark under-eye circles, and frantic energy? She looked more like a deeply troubled aging patient than a youthful intern. It had only been 2 years. "Serena, what the hell are you doing here?" Chloe exploded, detonating like a live grenade the second she locked eyes with me. "Zachary told me Ethan was in the hospital. I came to see him," I replied neutrally. "Are you here to see Ethan?" Or are you here to see Zachary? She sneered, pointing a trembling finger at me. What? Are you trying to use my pregnancy as an opportunity to seduce my husband? The woman was completely unhinged, but her erratic behavior shouldn't have been entirely surprising to me. Even though I hadn't seen Chloe in 2 years, Zachary and I still shared a few mutual acquaintances in the New York tech circle. Through the grapevine, I had heard the rumors ever since Chloe discovered she was pregnant with a boy. She had been acting like an untouchable queen. She became intensely paranoid. If Zachary's company hired any mildly attractive female employee, Chloe would storm into the corporate office, point at the woman's face, accuse her of seducing Zachary, and demand she be fired. She also forbade Zachary from attending evening networking events. If he dared to go, she would crash the high-end business dinners, throwing tantrums in front of venture capitalists. Her public meltdowns had cost Zachary several massive, multi-million-dollar contracts. People joked that she was driving Zachary to the brink of insanity. When I first heard those rumors, I had simply laughed. Insanity. Zachary used to absolutely adore her vibrant, lively spirit. This was exactly what he signed up for. Get the hell out of here. Zachary suddenly barged out of the hospital room, directing his furious roar entirely at Chloe. He looked absolutely murderous, as if he genuinely wanted to strangle her on the spot. Chloe flinched, clearly startled. She had probably never seen Zachary direct that level of pure, unadulterated hatred toward her. But a second later, she puffed out her chest, thrusting her pregnant belly forward like a bulletproof shield. If you ever dare to betray me, I will literally die right in front of you, she screamed at him. And you better get rid of your son, or we are finished. Having delivered her final threat, Chloe turned and waddled aggressively down the corridor toward the elevators. Zachary stood in the hallway, his hands clenched into tight fists, his whole body shaking with suppressed rage. I stood a few feet away, watching the entire spectacle unfold like a poorly written soap opera. Do you think I deserve this? Zachary suddenly asked, turning his exhausted eyes toward me. Are you laughing at me? I instantly wiped the faint smirk off my face. Your marriage is none of my business. I have no comment. I never imagined that getting pregnant would turn Chloe into an entirely different person, he muttered, running a stressed hand over his face. I have zero interest in your marital problems, I reminded him coolly. I'm here to see my son. Zachary clamped his mouth shut, stepping aside to let me pass. I pushed open the door and walked into the private room. Ethan was lying on the stark white hospital bed, a heavy cast wrapped around his right leg. His eyes were completely bloodshot. It was obvious he had heard every single word of the vicious screaming match outside. The second he saw me, a desperate light sparked in his tear-filled eyes. Mom, he cried out. I gave him a brief, unenthusiastic nod, and casually asked the attending nurse about his medical charts. Ethan couldn't hold it in. Between ragged sobs, he told me what happened. He said he was just coming home from school and walking up the stairs when Chloe deliberately shoved him down the steps. But when Zachary rushed over, Chloe immediately began weeping, lying through her teeth. She claimed Ethan had tried to push her because he was jealous of the new baby, and that she had merely acted in self-defense, accidentally knocking him backward. She is so mean to me, Mom. She is evil. Ethan wept, the tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. All those times she was nice to me before, she was just faking it. Ever since she married Dad, she secretly hits me and calls me a bastard child with no mother. She forces me to eat greasy fried chicken and burgers every day, even when I'm full and feel sick. She says garbage food is all I deserve. Ethan cried harder, his body shaking with the force of his sobs. I stood by the edge of the bed, listening to his horrific confession, with complete chilling emotional detachment. You shouldn't be telling me this, I said flatly, my voice devoid of warmth. You need to tell your father, or your grandmother. They don't believe me, they only believe Aunt Chloe, Ethan wailed. They only care about the stupid baby in her stomach. They don't love me anymore. They hate me. Mom, please let me come live with you. Ethan lunged forward, desperately grabbing onto my sleeve with his small hands. I promise I'll be so good. I'll do all my homework. I'll listen to every rule. I'll never say mean things to you again. Mom, I know now that you're the only one who ever truly loved me. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have hated you. Please forgive me, please. He just kept crying and begging, terrified to his core that I would leave him there, but the truth was, I had already left him. I firmly peeled his frantic fingers off my coat. One by one. I looked down at him and spoke with a gentle, yet impossibly distant tone. Ethan, everyone has to take responsibility for the choices they make. The day you chose Aunt Chloe, I permanently exited your world, but I regret it. I know I made a mistake. He sobbed. If you regret it, you need to figure out how to adapt and change yourself, not demand that I change my life to fix it, I stated calmly. My life belongs entirely to me now, and I will not compromise it for anyone, especially not for him or Zachary. Without a backward glance, I turned on my heel and walked out of the hospital room. I could never forgive him. And honestly, I had zero desire to. Serena, when did you become so utterly cold-blooded? Zachary was standing right outside the door, his face twisted in accusatory anger. Ethan is your biological son. Are you really just going to abandon him to the wolves? Don't you feel any guilt for what you're doing to him? I stopped walking, turned to face Zachary, and addressed his ridiculous accusations with systematic cold precision. First of all, per the terms of our legally binding divorce agreement, I deposit a substantial child support check into his account on the first of every month. I have perfectly fulfilled my legal and financial obligations. As his mother, I have not abandoned him. Secondly, Ethan is your biological son too. You are the one who aggressively fought for and won full legal custody. It is your absolute responsibility to manage your chaotic personal life and ensure your son has a safe, comfortable environment. If you cannot protect him from your new wife, that is your failure, not mine. And finally, I stepped slightly closer, my voice dropping to a sharp whisper. Our marriage fell apart entirely because you decided to cheat. You have absolutely no right to stand there and tell me I owe Ethan anything. The only person who destroyed his life and owes him an apology is you. Zachary's face flushed a deep, embarrassed crimson. For several long seconds he stared at the sterile hospital floor, completely unable to formulate a defense. Then, as if gathering some monumental misplaced courage, he looked up at me. Serena, are you just holding out until I officially admit defeat and beg you? I stared at him, genuinely baffled by his sheer delusion. You're acting this way because you want me to formally apologize. You want to hear me say that I regret divorcing you and marrying Chloe, Zachary continued, misinterpreting my silence as a victory. Fine, I admit it. I was wrong, he proclaimed. Even in his apology, his tone remained incredibly arrogant and condescending. I shouldn't have let myself be seduced by Chloe. I shouldn't have let her ruin our relationship. And I shouldn't have signed those papers. He took a step toward me, adopting a commanding, serious tone. Here is my promise to you. My lawyers advised me that it is legally too risky and complicated to divorce her right now, while she is pregnant and threatening suicide. But the literal second she gives birth and the legalities are cleared, I will file for divorce. Then, we can get back together. I remained completely silent, staring at him. I was genuinely shocked by the sheer thickness of his skin. I could not comprehend how a human being could harbor such a massive, unjustified ego. Uttering those words as if he were bestowing a royal pardon upon a peasant. I know you've been entirely single for the past 2 years, Zachary said, offering me a knowing smirk. You've been obsessively studying for your degrees, hitting the gym, getting into incredible shape. You're doing all of this just to prove a point to me, aren't you? You want me to see what I threw away. You want me to regret it. I couldn't help it. A loud, genuine laugh escaped my throat. You actually believe that I completely overhauled my life just to perform for you? Serena, neither of us is getting any younger. There is no need to play these exhausting games anymore. I'm offering you an out. You should be smart and take it. I am not a patient man, Zachary warned, looking slightly annoyed by my laughter. He quickly outlined his grand plan. I own a luxury penthouse in Tribeca. You and Ethan can move in there temporarily. Once my divorce with Chloe is finalized, You can officially move back into the main estate." I didn't say a single word. I just looked at him and smiled. "What are you smiling at? Are you really that thrilled?" Zachary asked, frowning defensively. "I'm smiling because I am utterly fascinated that someone can be this shamelessly narcissistic," I replied. "Serena," Zachary barked, his face immediately clouding with rage. "I really don't know where you get your boundless confidence," I sneered. "What on earth makes you think I would ever remarry an irresponsible, cheating, wildly arrogant dog like you? Do I look mentally ill to you?" "You better watch your mouth, Serena. I am giving you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to come back to your family out of pity for our son." "Don't push your luck," Zachary snarled, jabbing a finger toward me. "Save your generous opportunities for some other desperate fool. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole," I enunciated clearly. "And honestly, I find the very thought of you repulsive." "Stop acting so damn superior," Zachary exploded, completely abandoning his sophisticated facade. "Do you seriously think that any decent man is going to want a woman in her mid-30s, who has already been married and carries the baggage of a 10-year-old kid? Any guy who approaches you is just looking for a cheap fling. No real man is ever going to actually marry a woman like you, and yet, you're on the verge of your second divorce," I pointed out mockingly. "Men and women are completely different. When a man makes a mistake and turns his life around, he is celebrated as a redeemed hero. But a used woman," Zachary spat, his expression twisting into something deeply ugly and contemptuous. So that was the true rotting core of Zachary Davis. This deeply ingrained, disgusting misogyny was the exact reason he had felt perfectly justified in repeatedly cheating on me during our marriage. He truly believed that as a wealthy man, he was a prize, while I was an expiring commodity. "You don't need to worry about my dating prospects," I replied, entirely unruffled by his venom. "Even if I never find another man for the rest of my life, I would rather die alone than consider getting back together with you." Before Zachary could interrupt, I held up a hand. "Furthermore, who made up the rule that a woman needs a man to survive? Why can't I just thrive on my own? I am living a spectacular, peaceful life right now. Why on earth would I willingly shackle myself to a man just so I can play his mate again? Do I not know how to spend my own money? Do I not know how to enjoy my own life? Am I missing a limb, requiring a man to prop me up?" Zachary's face turned a violent shade of purple. But he couldn't find the words to argue back. The more I spoke, the funnier the entire situation became to me. Laughing softly, I turned and walked away from him down the hospital corridor. I genuinely couldn't comprehend how, in this modern era, Zachary's suffocatingly patriarchal worldview could be so deeply, unironically entrenched in his psyche. My brain must have been entirely broken in my past life to have tolerated his suffocating presence for decades. After that profoundly unpleasant encounter at Mount Sinai, Zachary finally stopped harassing me. I successfully graduated with my master's and immediately secured a highly coveted spot in Columbia's PhD program, happily continuing my journey in the academic world I loved so much. A few months later, an invitation for our undergraduate class reunion arrived. Initially, I had zero intention of going. I was too busy analyzing data for my thesis, but my former college roommate aggressively guilt-tripped me into it. She practically begged, swearing up and down that Zachary wouldn't be there. "His life is an absolute dumpster fire right now," she promised over the phone. "There is zero chance he is going to show his face in public. Please come." Reluctantly, I agreed. The reunion was held at a sleek, dimly lit lounge in Midtown Manhattan. Almost immediately after we sat down with our drinks, the table erupted into eager gossip. "Oh my God, have you guys heard?" Our old class president whispered excitedly, leaning over the table. "Zachary almost got murdered by his crazy new wife." He paused, casting a slightly nervous glance in my direction. Serena, you don't mind us talking trash about your ex-husband, do you?" I took a sip of my martini and smiled comfortably. "You just said it yourself. He is my ex. Why would I care?" "Okay, perfect, because the tea is piping hot," he continued eagerly, abandoning all restraint. So Zachary's new wife is apparently a total psychopath. She is completely unhinged. She thought because she was pregnant with his precious heir, she owned the world. She embarrassed him constantly, fired any pretty girl at his office, and literally screamed at his investors. Zachary's company stock plummeted because she was destroying his reputation. I even heard she was trying to force Zachary to throw his oldest kid out onto the streets to secure the inheritance for her baby. But wait, none of that is even the best part. The real bombshell dropped a few weeks ago. What? Tell us. Several classmates chimed in, leaning closer. The class president's eyes widened dramatically. Chloe finally gave birth. But the baby isn't Zachary's. No way. Are you serious? How did he find out? The table exploded in shocked, delighted gasps. When a baby is born at the hospital, they always run routine blood tests, right? Well, the medical report came back showing the newborn was type O. Zachary is type AB. It is genetically impossible for an AB parent to produce a type O child. The class president announced triumphantly. Oh my God, Zachary must have completely lost his mind. The ultimate betrayal. A woman gasped. Especially after Chloe spent the whole pregnancy acting like a tyrant because of that kid. He must have wanted to kill her. Exactly. Word on the street is that Zachary went berserk and nearly beat her to death in the hospital room. The president nodded gravely. Now they're going through a terrifyingly toxic divorce. And because Zachary physically assaulted her, she is apparently suing him for a massive chunk of his assets. I sat quietly, swirling the olive in my glass. Who says karma isn't real? Hearing this news was undeniably, immensely satisfying. My former roommate nudged my arm, grinning widely. See, aren't you glad you came? That gossip alone was worth the cab fare. I nodded, genuinely amused. It definitely put me in a great mood. However, just as the reunion was winding down, and people were preparing to ask for the check, the heavy lounge doors swung open. To everyone's absolute shock, Zachary walked in. Since we had just spent the better part of an hour gleefully dissecting the spectacular collapse of his life, his sudden appearance cast an immediate, suffocating awkwardness over the lounge. Is the party over? Zachary asked. He was the only one who seemed entirely unfazed by the heavy silence, acting as casually as if he were just arriving for a scheduled dinner reservation. Yeah, we're wrapping up, the class president quickly stammered frantically, waving for the waiter to bring the check. My apologies. I had some business to attend to and arrived late, Zachary said smoothly. No worries, man. We'll catch up next time, the president replied bluntly. In the old days, everyone would have eagerly reorganized, ordering another round of drinks just to network with the tech billionaire. Tonight the crowd couldn't scatter fast enough. They mumbled quick goodbyes and practically sprinted for the exit. Zachary didn't try to stop them because I had drank a martini and didn't drive. I found myself standing alone on the chilly Manhattan sidewalk, trying to hail a cab through the steady stream of city traffic. A sleek black Maybach slowly pulled up to the curb. The tinted passenger window rolled down. Get in. I'll take you home, Zachary offered. No thanks. I declined immediately, keeping my eyes fixed on the street. Just get in, Serena. It is on my way. I said no. Realizing I was not going to yield, Zachary put the car in park, pushed the door open, and stepped onto the sidewalk. He stood directly in front of me, forcing me to acknowledge him. I crossed my arms and looked at him blankly, pretending he was nothing more than a minor obstacle on the pavement. You probably heard all about it inside. How Chloe played me for a fool, Zachary said, his voice surprisingly quiet. I caught the highlights, I replied, making absolutely no effort to hide the truth. After all, it really was an incredibly hilarious story. My divorce with Chloe was finalized in court today, Zachary stated, his dark eyes locking onto mine, searching for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I simply didn't care. The legal status of his disastrous marriage was entirely irrelevant to my existence. Last time at the hospital, I admit my approach was wrong. I didn't show enough sincerity, Zachary continued, his tone dropping into something resembling humility. The truth is, Serena, I've regretted leaving you for a long time. I was just too damn proud to admit it and beg you to come back. I looked at him, genuinely amused by the sheer absurdity of his words. Oh, so now you can finally swallow your pride. Or is it simply because you literally have no one else who wants you? I thought you said, a man who makes mistakes is a redeemed hero? Serena, I know I said some incredibly harsh things to you that day, but I never actually wanted to hurt you. Zachary pleaded, looking genuinely exhausted. I was desperate. I just didn't know how to get through to you. How to make you come back to me. So, I tried using reverse psychology to provoke you. Well, thank you so much for your brilliant reverse psychology. It succeeded in making me realize you are even more nauseating than I originally thought. I snapped back, my patience entirely depleted. Zachary's face went pale, then flushed a dull red. He swallowed hard. Serena, I'm sorry. I really truly know I was wrong. I swear to God, from this day forward, I will never do anything to betray you ever again. Let's start over. Just you, me, and our son. Our family of 3. A family of 3. How on earth did those words manage to physically leave his mouth without choking him? The absolute audacity made me want to vomit on his expensive designer shoes. Come home with me, Zachary urged softly. Reaching out to grab my hand, I sidestepped him flawlessly, leaving his hand grasping empty air. Zachary looked awkwardly at his empty palm, letting his arm drop. Ethan is waiting for us at the penthouse. He has missed you so much these past 2 years, Serena. He deeply regrets the cruel things he said to you when he was younger. And honestly, it is not just him. I regret everything too. Can you please just find it in your heart to forgive us this one time? I do not forgive you, I said, shaking my head. I delivered the answer with absolute, uncompromising finality. Serena, why exactly does your regret dictate my forgiveness? I asked, a cold, mocking smile forming on my lips. If I forgive you, then what happens to all the suffering and humiliation I endured? What does that amount to? What about the entire lifetime I wasted before I finally woke up? What do you mean, an entire lifetime? Zachary frowned, clearly confused by my phrasing. I saw no need to explain the concept of rebirth to a narcissist. What I mean is, the exact second those divorce papers were signed, everything between us permanently died. I said coldly, you need to stop wasting your time coming to look for me, and stop using Ethan as a bargaining chip to broker a peace treaty. None of it will work. In fact, your constant presence is actively annoying me, because it is disrupting my peace. You're just scared that I haven't genuinely changed, aren't you? Zachary reasoned, looking at me with an expression of profound misplaced understanding. If I were in your shoes, I'd have the same fears, but I'll prove it to you, Serena. I'll show you my actions. How clearly do I have to spell this out in English? I am never getting back together with you. I almost shouted. You've stayed completely single this whole time. Haven't you? Zachary countered smugly. He had cemented it in his mind. To Zachary, the fact that I hadn't remarried was irrefutable proof that I was secretly waiting for him to turn his life around. I was completely out of energy to argue with him. Zachary was blinded by his own colossal ego. He truly believed that no matter how far he strayed, the moment he decided to turn his head and look back, I would inevitably be standing exactly where he left me, waiting loyally. Let him think whatever he wanted. Eventually, reality would violently crash into him, and he would realize that I had walked so far ahead. I was completely out of his league and out of his reach. Half a year later, Columbia University hosted its massive centennial alumni celebration. The campus was alive with festivities, and alumni from all over the world flooded into the historic grounds in Morningside Heights. As a distinguished graduate, and now a highly accomplished doctoral researcher, I was invited to stand on the grand stage of the main auditorium as a keynote speaker. The massive hall was packed to the brim with thousands of attendees. And sitting somewhere in that vast sea of faces was Zachary. He probably couldn't believe his eyes. That the woman he had discarded was now standing on such a dazzling, prestigious platform. Behind me, the massive projector screen displayed a timeline of my academic breakthroughs and published research over the past few years. Achievements significant enough to earn me a permanent plaque in the university's Hall of History. When I finished my speech, The entire auditorium erupted into thunderous, standing applause. Over the roaring crowd, I could hear younger students cheering loudly, calling out my name with genuine admiration. I smiled, bowed deeply to the audience, and gracefully exited the stage. As I walked across the sunlit campus quad a little while later, groups of ambitious undergrads stopped me, eagerly asking for photos and advice on their graduate applications. After finally managing to politely excuse myself from the last group of starry-eyed students, I turned around and saw them. Zachary was standing right there, accompanied by a much taller, older-looking Ethan. The moment Ethan saw me looking at them, he bounded forward, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, I was in the auditorium, I watched your whole speech, and I was so incredibly proud. Everyone around me was whispering about how brilliant you are." I offered him a faint, polite smile and murmured a brief word of thanks, treating him exactly as I would a stranger's child. Then, I immediately turned to walk away. "Serena." Zachary called out my name, his voice tight with sudden anxiety. I paused and glanced back at him. He was looking at me with a gaze still clouded by shock. It was as if he was desperately trying to pinpoint the exact moment I had fundamentally transformed. The woman standing before him, confident, radiant, and intellectually revered, was an alien entity compared to the exhausted, anxious, middle-aged housewife whose entire universe revolved around him and his son. "You were truly incredible today," Zachary said, his voice laced with genuine awe. "I honestly never imagined you would achieve this level of prestige in the academic world." "So does that mean you finally have the self-awareness to realize where you stand?" I asked, a sharp, mocking edge to my voice. A flash of deep embarrassment crossed Zachary's face, but he quickly swallowed his pride. "Serena, I didn't want to get back together with you, just because of your success. I was begging for another chance long before I knew about any of this. I know you harbor a lot of resentment toward me for my betrayal," Zachary said, panic bleeding into his words as he finally seemed to grasp that I was slipping through his fingers forever. "But the truth is, the only woman I have ever truly loved is you. What I had with Chloe was nothing but temporary novelty and male vanity. From the very beginning to the very end, I never actually wanted to divorce you. My relationship with Chloe was just acting." I stared at him. I genuinely believed I was currently listening to the greatest, most pathetic joke of both my past and present lives, but I didn't interrupt him. I wanted to hear exactly how deep his delusions ran. "Do you know why I fought so aggressively for Ethan's custody back then?" Zachary asked, looking at me with profound agonizing regret. "It was because I knew you couldn't bear to leave him. I thought if I demanded custody, you would back down and we wouldn't divorce. But I never expected you to actually give him up. You backed me into a corner, and my pride wouldn't let me back down. I was forced to sign those papers. Even after the divorce, I didn't actually want to build a life with Chloe. I was just biding my time, waiting for you to calm down and come back. Serena, I swear to you, every single time I slept with Chloe, I used condoms. I never ever intended for her to get pregnant." I almost burst out laughing right then and there. Oh, how generous of him. I should probably fall to my knees and thank him for his profound mercy. That even while he was thoroughly cheating on me emotionally and physically, he had the angelic grace to wrap it in latex. When Chloe told me she was pregnant, my mind went blank. I honestly thought my protection had just failed. It never even crossed my mind that she was actively cheating on me and making me raise another man's bastard. Zachary said, his voice trembling with renewed rage at the memory. I paused for a long time when she demanded a ring. "Do you remember that night I called you? I was waiting for you to tell me not to marry her. If you had said the word, I would have dropped her, but you didn't say anything. I was so angry and humiliated that I agreed to the wedding. Even on the actual day of the wedding, I kept looking at the doors, desperately waiting for you to show up and stop the ceremony. If you had just walked in, I would have chosen you immediately. But you never came. I had no choice but to go through with it." Listening to Zachary recount his bizarre, twisted version of true love left me utterly speechless. To call it pathetic would be an insult to the word. "Once I married her, Chloe started acting like a tyrant," Zachary continued, his face twisting in misery. She made me a laughingstock in the entire financial sector. That was when I truly deeply realized how incredible you always were, how tolerant, how perfect you were for me. I wanted to divorce her instantly and run back to you. But she was heavily pregnant. And the law wouldn't let me. So I desperately tried to use Ethan to keep you in our orbit, hoping you'd wait for me. Do you have any idea how terrified I was? I was so scared I was going to lose you forever. Zachary's eyes were completely red. He looked like a broken man. I found it all incredibly comical. Because back then, I certainly hadn't sensed an ounce of fear in him. When he was shoving his new life in my face, he had stood atop his pedestal, as arrogant and high and mighty as ever. And then Chloe had the baby, and I found out it wasn't mine, Zachary said, his eyes locking onto mine with desperate hope. I was furious, yes, but do you know what else I felt? Absolute relief, because it meant I could immediately throw her out, and finally be with you. He stepped closer. Serena, I am so sorry. I was incredibly stupid. But from today onward, if I ever do a single thing to hurt you again, I'll break my own legs. Mom, I promise I'll be good too, Ethan chimed in, tears streaming down his face as he echoed his father's desperate vow. I'll listen to everything you say. I will never break your heart again. I looked at the father and son, standing before me. I looked at their profound remorse. I looked at their deep, dramatic declarations of love. I looked at the fragile, desperate expectation in their eyes, and yet, my heart remained a stone. Absolutely, completely unmoved. When I didn't react, Zachary took another step forward. Serena, please come back to us. Give us the rest of our lives to make up for the pain we caused you. There is no need. I shook my head slowly. I healed from that pain a very long time ago. I didn't need them to fix it. And I certainly didn't want them in my life. Serena, Zachary, do you honestly lack the basic self-awareness to realize that you are completely unworthy of me now? I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut glass, utterly shredding his delusions. Zachary panicked, his hands shaking slightly. Serena, I love you. I love the essence of who you are. Whether you were the woman from back then or the brilliant researcher you are now. I don't care about your prestige, but why would I, a brilliant, successful woman, ever stoop down to pick up a piece of trash? I asked, laughing softly at his sheer absurdity. I didn't leave him a single shred of dignity. His face flushed a deep, humiliating red. Shame finally seemed to pierce his armor. Yet, he still stubbornly clung to his final lifeline. But Serena, you're still completely single, aren't you? So his entire foundation of hope still rested on the assumption that my single status was an eternal vigil dedicated to him. I smiled and simply turned my gaze away from him. Looking over his shoulder, Julian quickly walked over from the edge of the courtyard. He wrapped his arm naturally and firmly around my waist, pulling me close against his side. It was obvious he had been waiting eagerly for me to wave him over. Julian looked at the two men in front of us and offered a relaxed, perfectly polite smile. Ah, the ex-husband. And the eldest son. Good to see you. Zachary's eyes widened in horror, immediately zeroing in on Julian's hand, resting securely on my hip. Serena, just because you want to reject me doesn't mean you have to grab some random guy off the street to put on an act. He is not random, I cut in. I knew exactly what Zachary was trying to say, and I had absolutely zero patience left for it. I looked him dead in the eye. I was single for so many years because I discovered that being alone was wonderful. I am no longer single because I discovered that this man is genuinely wonderful. So wonderful. In fact, that I am perfectly willing to start a new marriage with him. I watched the color completely drain from Zachary's face as the reality of my words hit him. I decided to deliver the final fatal blow. So you see, whether I am single or not has absolutely nothing to do with you, I concluded smoothly. It is entirely my own choice, and as for you, you are nothing to me. Nothing at all. With that, Julian and I turned around and began walking away, our shoulders pressed happily together. Just as we took a few steps, Julian casually glanced over his shoulder and dropped one last bombshell on the frozen men behind us. By the way, Serena is pregnant, twins. Julian always knew exactly how to twist the knife, where it hurt the most. I didn't turn my head to see the expressions on Zachary and Ethan's faces. I just kept walking forward into the sunlight, faintly drifting on the wind. I heard Ethan's voice crack in a devastating broken sob. Dad. Does Mom really, truly not want us anymore? Yay. Zachary's voice was hoarse, suffocating under the crushing weight of a tragedy entirely of his own making. She really doesn't. She hasn't wanted us for a very, very long time. He was the only one who had spent the last few years lying to himself.
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.